in the fall of 2001, I got a letter from Summit saying, their pipeline, we're going to have a pipeline come through. And I just kind of put it aside because we were still harvesting and stuff, and I was getting ready to go south. I go south in the winter for 3 months. And some people showed up and wanted to do an archaeological survey on some of our land, and I didn't think much of it because they said for a pipeline, and I thought, well, okay, a gas line or whatever. And so I said, yeah, you go ahead and do it. And that was my first big mistake. And so they did, and they found some Indian artifacts, and they had it coming by our place. And then once they did that and found the artifacts, then they moved it even closer to our place and ran that pipeline about 400 feet from my brother's house and about 500 feet from the feed lot. We feed about 4,000 head of cattle. And then it would come up on the upland. It comes up out of the river bottom, the James River, and then it would go within 1,000 feet of the rest of the feed lot, my 2 sons' houses, and my grandchildren, and my house. And then, so we're all within 1,000 feet of that pipeline. And once we found that out, well, then Ed and I got to talking, and then found out about Mr. Jordry, and we signed up with him. But in the meantime, we had 3 people came and met with us wanting to buy an easement. Well, they were very cheap on their money at first. And we said no because we didn't want a pipeline. Once we found out what it was and how dangerous it was, we said no. Well, then I joined up with Mr. Jordry. Well, we signed up for him to represent us to kind of keep the pipeline off of our land if at all possible. And then they came one last time, wanted to meet with us really bad. This was back in May of last year. Okay. And they met with us. I told them where you guys are running it, that ground is not stable because it's right beside a borrow pit, and that land moves and it slides into the river. And I said, you've got to move that. And I took him out and actually showed him the location. He said, they got no business running a pipeline here. And he asked me, and I kind of told him where it probably should be. And he said, okay, I'll draw up some plans and we'll get them to you. And I said, okay. And then as he left the meeting, and it was one of the head engineers, he said, let's keep the lines of communication open, and I'm sure we can work this out. Later that afternoon, I found out they filed eminent domain on us. So they lied to us. Surprise. Yeah, they're trying to work with us, but yet they filed eminent domain on us. So then after that, then everything, we just stopped talking to them. We told them, go away. And they never did give us anything to say that they'd moved the pipeline either. So I got a letter, and I was told by one of the higher guys up in the company that they're planning on moving the pipeline over west of us about 10 miles. I don't know, because they've lied to me 4 times. So I can't tell if they're telling me the truth or not. So right now, as it stands, it's still going through my place as far as I'm concerned until I see a new pipe route, when they file at the PUC. I have a chemistry degree, and I know all about the properties. I've done a lot of the technical work. I was the first one to put the numbers together as far as they're going to run they said originally a 24-inch pipeline. Now it's going to have to be, being they added another 25 or 27 ethanol plants to this pipeline, it's going to have to be a minimum of 32 or 36-inch pipe, or bigger. I'm not sure. So this is going to be, I took the numbers for a 24-inch pipeline, ran the numbers. They said they're bragging about only having 20 miles between emergency shutoffs. You take that volume of what's in that pipe, that liquid is, I don't remember the numbers right offhand on the liquid part, but you have a ductile fracture, which is where it would rip lengthwise and open up entirely, it would expand to 180 1.3 million cubic feet of CO2. And that will cover an area of about 3 miles. And that would be at 100%. At 10%, you will die in about 3-4 minutes. So your concentrations are extremely high. And it can move. At Satartia, Mississippi, that burst moved 9 miles. And we live on the edge, and it's going to flow downhill into the river bottom. So it's going to all flow over us and the feedlot if it would rupture to the west of us. And this pipeline, as big as it is, if it's up to a 36-inch, that will, what they called Navigator, we finally got some of Plume's studies from Navigator's testimony out at Pier. On a 9-inch pipeline, they said that's an 1,800-foot, what they call the kill zone. That's lethal. You will not, if you're within that range, you will not be able to get out of that area fast enough to save your life. You will be killed. Now, you translate a 9-inch into a 36-inch pipe, that kill zone is 5 miles. Well, it doesn't bother plant life because plant life needs CO2 to live. We're at 4% CO2 in the atmosphere, or 0.04, I'm sorry. At 0.07, we will grow about 20 to 35, 40% more crops on less water and less fertilizer because CO2 is what the plant has to have to produce sugar, which makes it grow better and more aggressive. In 1850, the CO2 levels were at 0.025, or about 200 parts per million. At 150 parts per million, plants die from CO2 deficiency. We were that close to an extinction event in 1850. And I got all these numbers from Dr. Patrick Moore. He is the founder of, one of the co-founders of Greenpeace, so he is not, he's more environmentally friendly than most. And he said this was a disaster waiting to happen. And he explained in his video, if you go on YouTube, he's got a video on CO2 and explains all that. He's got a chart that shows where we've had 1,000 parts per million and a very low temperature, and we've had like 400 or 500 parts per million, and we've had very high temperatures. So he said there really is no historical relationship between CO2 levels and temperature. He said all they're looking at is the last 10,000 years or so. Well, 10,000 years ago, we had a mile of ice sitting on top of us right here. We are just starting to come out of an ice age. What should temperatures be doing when you come out of an ice age? They should be going up because we've been cold. So where normal is, I don't know, but the planet has never been so hot that life couldn't exist on here because we've had dinosaurs and, 10,000 years is a blink of an eye or less in geological time. We keep records back to 1800. That's nothing. They have no records. And with the chemistry background, the CO2 particle does not retain that much heat that they're saying this is a global disaster. Yes, it can produce some heat or store some heat, but the water molecule will store multiple times more. And they aren't doing anything about water vapor in the air. So this is all stuff that I said. I'm going to veer off now from the science. I've spent 69 years of my life avoiding politics. I got into politics this summer, or this spring. I was a precinct committee man, and I went out to the Republican convention because we wanted to try to get a resolution through and stuff, and it was all stacked against us. And I gave all of this testimony and stuff, and we actually got Mr. Cliffeld, Mike Cliffeld and I testified, and we actually got that resolution passed, which was, I figured we had zero chance of getting it done, but we actually got it done. And the science and stuff, I think, It's scared. When I was given those numbers, and then I also was telling about how many billions of dollars Summit's going to make in 12 years, which is about 24 or 25 billion. That's our tax money. That's our money that they're going to make in 12 years. Well, eyes opened at that number, and then the 5-mile kill zone opened eyes on that number, and then you take this 5-mile expand to 10, and you're still only at 50% concentration, which is still lethal, and that could move 9-10 miles. That would rupture down by Sioux Falls. That could blow into the edge of Sioux Falls. You could have a terrible loss of life. It's scary. It's extremely scary. It's not if a pipeline will fail, it's when. Pipelines always break. We've got the Keystone just east of here, about 20 miles. It's 13 years old. It's had two major ruptures in the last 6 years, I think. Out by Langford, and then one down in Kansas this last year. So, and right now, PHMSA's rules, they can build that pipeline to the same specifications of a 500 to a 1600 PSI oil pipeline, and this is a 2200 PSI pipeline. So it's there, and I asked the engineers, he said, we're going to use basically a half-inch sidewall pipe on a 36-inch pipe. On an oxygen cylinder, they use 3/4 or better, thicker steel, and that's just a little bitty cylinder, and that's 2200 PSI. So they're going to put the same pressure in this pipe with a thinner sidewall. CO2, if there's any moisture gets in there at all, will instantly form carbonic acid, which is extremely corrosive to high carbon steel, which is what the pipeline is made out of. And I asked them, are you coating the inside of that pipeline to protect for corrosion? And they said no, just the outside.
Let's talk about when it's sequestered underground. If it comes in contact with groundwater, what does the carbonic acid do?
Carbonic acid will then leach into the rocks and leach out minerals, which will make that water unusable for potable water, because the minerals will be so concentrated that the treatment plants won't be able to clean it. They've done a study, there's a study, Montana did a study of it already, and they found that it was untreatable. They were unable to resurrect it. So yes, if you start pumping millions of tons of CO2, high pressure CO2 in the ground, and that starts fracturing and it starts moving, it can come into contact with water tables. Eventually, if it's dry, it will eventually work in and kind of chemically form with the bedrock and make calcium carbonate or calcium sulfate. It'll become a semi-rock. We need the CO2 for our plant life. We don't need it in the ground. And I've been told, and I have to verify this, but they're using enhanced oil recovery in Wyoming, and the rock is fairly friable. Well, they've got CO2 leaking out the top of the ground, and some of the workers have to wear a SBA when they're working over there, which is a self-breathing apparatus.